Okay, it looks like people are trickling in to our webinar. We'll give a few more seconds. While people are trickling in, let me just introduce myself. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, depending on where in the world you're logging in from. My name is Tony Yang. I'm the head of growth here at Mucker Capital. And today we are having a fantastic session on the topic of product-led growth, PLG, specifically for startups. It's going to be an AMA style, Ask Me Anything style type of webinar with our expert guest, excuse me, who I'll introduce in a second. But before we do that, let's go through a couple of housekeeping items like we do for every single web sessions that we do. So first of all, we are recording this session. However, we are only making the full recording available to Mucker portfolio companies within our founder portal. For everybody else, if you're not a Mucker portfolio company, that's okay, because we will be providing a recap via our blog with some snippets of the video here and there. So make sure that one, you'll check your email after the webinar is done to announce when that recap is available or the full recording. And certainly if you want, you can subscribe to our blog and I'll give you more information at the end of this webinar. As I mentioned, this is an Ask Me Anything style webinar. So feel free to put in any questions that's burning for you on the topic of PLG directly into the Q&A box. It should be in the bottom control panel of your Zoom client. We'll get to them. We have prepared or have gathered questions just throughout the last few weeks as we've been promoting this webinar. So we have several questions already planned out to address, but certainly if you have additional questions that we haven't planned out, feel free to add them into the chat box or the Q&A box. Okay, so as I mentioned, my name is Tony, head of growth here at Mucker. Really why we're so excited about the session is to have Hila Qu, our expert guest, with me here in the session. By way of a quick background, she is currently the EIR at Reforge, which if you haven't heard about, it's a fantastic learning platform on all things related to growth, product, messaging, pricing. I've taken a couple classes there myself in the past, and she's currently there as an EIR. She's also a fellow Mucker mentor, and so if you are a Mucker portfolio company and want to reach out to her, you could certainly do that through our mentor database. And later on, if anybody else who wants to reach out to her, we'll provide some contact info. You can see both of our social media handles at the bottom if you want to find us and follow us or engage with us on LinkedIn, Twitter, et cetera, et cetera. Hila is also, in terms of her past experience and background, she has been head of growth, VP of growth at a number of different companies and startups, most notably Acorns and GitLab. And currently she's also doing a bunch of advising on the side. So she certainly keeps herself busy. Hila, welcome. We're super excited to have you and looking forward to a fantastic session.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tony, for the invitation. I get to know Will and Eric and Joe from many kind of Mucker investors from over the years, and it's fantastic to be able to participate in this session and share more about growth, about all the founders and friends out there.
Awesome. Well, again, great to have you here. Let's just jump right into it. Again, this is a Ask Me Anything style type of session here. And as I mentioned, we have had gathered several questions already in advance. Let's address this first one, because this whole first part of this AMA, the questions are centered around, does PLG, a product-led growth, really fit for my company? And so one of the questions that many people have been asking in preparation or leading up to this webinar is, are there types of companies, market segments, or industries or business models where PLG does not make sense? What are your thoughts on that, Hila?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic first question to think about, right? Whether this is awesome, but does that fit me? I think if you go back to first principle, thinking about what kind of company is a great fit for PLG, I would say the two important criteria. The first one is your target segment, your customer size. If you are primarily targeting very large enterprise companies, right? It's very hard usually to use PLG as the only way to sell to those companies. But if you target SMBs or prosumers, PLG is a fantastic way, and you have a very large user base to reach out to as well. The other dimension you need to think about is the product complexity. If you have let's say a very complicated product, for example, you sell AWS, you sell Snowflake, those are infrastructure product. It's very hard, again, for PLG to be the only and main motion because it isn't just not something one engineer will test and buy. Or if you have product similarly to that requires some configuration, think about Salesforce, segment, things like that. Someone need to set it up, right? That is a natural hurdle right there for PLG motion. So that is kind of another dimension to think about. Obviously, if you target enterprise customer, you usually have a very large ACV, like annual contract value, and the product usually is complex. So like that's kind of one dimension to think about. The other dimension I would think about is whether your product has an individual use case or it's only used by a company. Let's say Okta or some of those employee time tracking tool, right? As a user, as an individual user, I don't care. Like I have absolutely no interest of using this product myself, test it out. And so this type of product is a little bit harder to build a PLG motion based on the freemium user base. Or there, if you are kind of generating something that's brand new, right? This category is brand new. Nobody understand about it. Actually, a lot of the PLG SaaS tools, they require sales motion upfront because nobody understand those tools. You need a lot of education. Those type of tools actually require like work better actually in the initial days in the sales motion. But take a step back. I think it's all relevant. Whether it's fit or not, it's not absolutely yes or no. It's kind of on the spectrum. Even though you are a complex product like Salesforce or Segment, you may be able to build some freemium feature or PLG use case to allow end user to try it. So the ideal scenario is you can layer both. We can talk a little bit about that later.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I can just imagine what you just talked about. There's a lot of follow-on questions related to that. So let's jump ahead because there's a lot to uncover. Okay, the second question here is, and this is something that I have found quite a bit in terms of discussing or meeting with some of the founders and co-founders in the Mucker portfolio family. One of the common questions is, if I'm a founder of an early stage startup and I want to implement PLG, what should I focus on right now and what should I avoid?
Yeah. I think going back to the first question, the first step is determine the fit, right? We talk about using the product complexity, your target customer size, annual contract value, whether there is individual use case. That four thing can help you decide, is that even a fit for me? But for early stage founders, I think there are two particular scenarios PLG can be really helpful. The first one, I call it category disruptor. Like they're kind of existing very dominant player in this category. Think about Adobe. Adobe is dominating the kind of the Photoshop, right? The professional picture editing space for so many years. It's so powerful. But Figma is able to disrupt Adobe. There are many reasons, but a few reasons actually are PLG related. They make the product SaaS based. they build the collaboration, kind of the viral invitation of the product very easily into the product itself. It become a collaboration tool. And that really empowered a lot of growth loops of Figma and help them disrupt this space. So if you are building a product that has a lot of incumbents, they're very established, think about PLG might be one of your way to disrupt that market. The other thing is, I call those the PLG native, like those founders, those products, they are built for maybe prosumers. They really have their point of view in terms of what's the best way to do this, what's the best way to do design, what's the best way to do kind of documentation, like think about Notion, Canva, Slack, all of that. They have that expertise and just vision to build those PLG native products and use PLG to take it as long as possible, maybe before layering on the sales motion, things like that. So for early stage founder, those are the two scenarios I think PLG might be a great fit. From there, I would say build some conviction first before committing. You may just do some research, test out some kind of early free trial, or just test this thing small to build yourself enough conviction, because I've seen like people, everyone wants to do PLG now, but reality, many people like started and they do this for 1 month and it didn't work and they gave up. That will never work. PLG is not like you build a free trial, you launch an experiment. You need to commit to this growth motion. You need to invest at least for a year or even 2 years. So you want to build some conviction and then make a commit, rather than just casually get this started and realize, wow, how much work there is, and give up too prematurely.
Yeah.
And I think from there, I would say basically the two step I think about building PLG is, the first one is I call this build a foundation. The success of the foundation is you can get to first PLG conversion. You can actually have a user or prospect customer without talking to sales, can go to your website and sign up, try the product, and check out himself. Like, that's the success. In order to make that happen, you need to have those components, right? You need to have the free trial, freemium. You need to track the usage data, understand how they use the product in free and how to trigger them to convert. You need to build the checkout flow, all of that. That's the foundation. And then the second step is just experiment like crazy on that entire funnel to maximize that.
Yeah. So actually, I was going to ask about the follow-up question related to this, but you start to address it a little bit about the foundation. So a common question that I hear a lot with especially early stage startups where they just recently, I don't want to say recently, but they're past MVP stage, minimal viable product. Maybe they have a V1, okay, and they have a free version, free trial or free freemium, like a free account, free forever account. And that's actually one of the questions later on. We'll save that for the next few questions. But do you recommend, again, going back to this question, the nature of this question, what should they focus on right now? What should they avoid? Do you recommend that they focus on the setup and onboarding flow for that free trial or free user experience, or should they start thinking about things like collaboration that promotes viral effects and being able to get additional users on the platform, or anything else? What are your thoughts on that?
So kind of the situation is they have this basic build out already. It's working, but where do they focus first to make it better, make it work, basically more effective? I think my observation by working with many of my advisory clients is that onboarding and activation is usually an area I saw a lot of low-hanging fruits and opportunity, because a lot of times as founders, or as especially technical founders, engineers, product people, we believe if we build this, right? We build this, it's awesome feature, it's selling your pain point, you should come and use it.
Yeah.
It never happened, right? They first of all, they don't come. First, secondly, more importantly, they don't use it. Like in my past roles at Acorns, GitLab, whenever I start as a head of growth, one of the data point I will look into is what's the percentage of new user coming back the second day or coming back the second month. And usually you will see a pretty low percentage, even for pretty mature product. And that is the nature of this game. Like you marketing team and you do a lot of acquisition, people are coming, they sign up for a free trial, they sign up for free. But even the second day, most people don't come back. And there is a lot to be done there usually. For LG product, like how do we help them try out the most important feature in that first session? How do we help them see the value in there? So I think that's usually a really important focus area, because PLG essentially is really about product usage. Like you gave away the access to your product in exchange of their usage, with the goal of the usage will qualify them. The usage will nurture them. Usage will build them habit, retain them. Usage will ultimately convert them. Like, so usage is so important. I often see that as a great first focus area. The second one, I would say, there are usually a lot of low-hanging fruits in the self-service checkout experience. If you build that, right? Like think about when if you work in B2C, if you work in e-commerce, you optimize that card, add to cart, checkout cart, abandon cart flow like crazy, because that's your revenue. It's actually similar in PLG SaaS, but we don't do enough usually in there. And the pricing for SaaS is much more complicated. So there are usually a lot of opportunity there as well.
Yeah. So I do want to keep this moving, but like there's so many deeper conversations and questions as we go along. And so let me ask another related question to what you just said. So you talked about, you just talked about monetization, right? And then earlier you mentioned activation and onboarding, and many startups and founders are asking about acquisition, right? Like different potential stages of the journey or funnel, whatever you want to call it. For you, for let's just say again, early startups, early stage startups, what do you feel like founders should focus on first? I kind of know your answer, but I want to hear from you because I know what Reforge teaches. So what do you think? What category area should you be focusing on first?
Yeah, I think there's no perfect answer or standard answer, right? It's very different for different situation. But the general order, I would imagine, if you are really starting from scratch, is build a product, do a bunch of big change and even pivot to get to product market fit. In that stage, right? Growth is really not secondary. Growth is you want to have some users, some customers to help you validate whether your product are solving their problem. So you are really getting enough early users to help you validate, do you achieve a certain level of retention rate? Like that's a quantitative measure to know that, hey, I built something people use every day, or they will use continuously rather than just test it out and abandon, because that wouldn't be a solid foundation to acquire more new users. I think once you have that, you can begin to acquire some new user. You can begin to work on acquisition a little bit, but I wouldn't basically, again, the early acquisition are there to give you more users to work on, to continue to build out the product. I would actually, before you scale the acquisition like crazy, really figure out how to activate new users, how to convert them, a lot of those foundation things. And then once you do that, like you can really pour a lot of gas on the fire to do those big acquisition, because you are very confident you can activate a new user, you can convert them, they retain. So any marketing budget or any acquisition effort you do right now at large scale are not wasted. Again, in reality, sometimes you need to do those things and then repeat again, right? You do a little bit of acquisition, you have users to work on retention, activation, monetization, and then you have a foundation. You do a little bit another push on acquisition. I think you may do those in waves, and it may happen in parallel, but in general, you need to have that framework of let's figure out the foundation and then pour more gas on the fire.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I learned this the hard way early on in my career, working at, companies that had, before then, there wasn't a term PLG, but like I learned from that past mistakes where we focused a lot on acquisition and got a lot of user signups, but we didn't focus or think much about onboarding and activation. And yes, we did think about monetization, but that middle part, we saw a lot of people sign up, but they didn't really do anything. To your point earlier about like looking at metrics, do they return? KPIs and metrics is one of the questions we'll address in a second. But like, yeah, finding out that kind of different data points to measure what is like really helpful. But yeah, I've learned from my mistakes. Focusing on acquisition too much too early just ends up being a waste of resources and time, at least from my personal experience. Okay, let's jump to the next one. Okay, so setting up PLG, we lumped in 3 questions here because it's all around setting it up. There actually have been some questions coming in related to these questions. So I'm glad we're touching upon these right now. So let's take the first one and address that. Do you have to have a free trial or free version of your product in order to be called a PLG motion or implement PLG? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think in order to have a product to lead your growth, you need to have a product. The product here is not just your regular product. It's kind of something you can give away, right? It's a vehicle. Like I mentioned, you're giving away this product. You remove all the hurdle to access the product. So free trial and free version are the 2 most common, definitely most common vehicle for PLG. There are some other ways you can go around with it. For example, like Amplitude, it's a product analytics software. They have a hurdle because you usually require engineer to set it up, and then you can use that. But they build a very realistic simulation demo. So it's not just a demo, it's not a video, it's something you can play with. It's not your own data, it's fake data, but at least you can use that to play with the tool. That doesn't require any setting up, that doesn't require any configuration to be done. So that's one way you go around like the freemium, the free version, the free trial, if you cannot do that, right? If it's too hard. Or like for GitLab, we have open source version of the product for many developer tools. That's actually one potential vehicle of PLG. Or there's this concept of sidecar product. Basically, it's not directly giving away a free version of your product, but you build something really related to that, make it for free. For example, HubSpot has this very, very famous website grader. You grade your website and you attract the same audience, right? Which are the marketers and people to your main product, but this thing is free. Or there is a developer product, they build kind of a security vulnerability free scanner. It's a free thing. They have it on their own website. You can use it for free. It becomes a little bit of this vehicle. But again, free trial and freemium are the most obvious. And I saw your next question. How do you decide? I think that's a great question. If usually freemium can give you bigger user base, but your immediate conversion rate is lower. And free trial doesn't give you as many free user base, but the immediate conversion rate is higher. So if you go to the next slide, I have a chart that shows kind of a little bit difference. This is a research from OpenView. They did this. So basically you can see free trials, free to paid conversion rate is almost double than the freemium. But does that mean free trial is better? Not necessarily. Like I think longer term, freemium has a lot of advantage, especially if your product has a network effect. You can really grab market share. You can really become very defensible. Free trial is a better strategy for quicker conversion. or a little bit more constrained experience. You want to give away, but you don't want to give too much. You still have a revenue goal to hit this quarter, something like that. Some companies actually combine those two. They have something called reverse trial. So that's if you use tools like Airtable, and many products actually do that today. When you come in, I give you freemium by default. I give you a free trial by default. And after 14 days or 30 days, you have a choice to make. You can either upgrade to paid. If you don't, you can downgrade to free, and the freemium is forever. So like that's one way to combine those two. Yeah, I think you have a last question there around.
Yeah, I do want to offer some of my insights or experience regarding the freemium versus free trial. I think what you described, combining into a reverse freemium, you know, like if that is the term, I think that addresses some of the pros and cons for both types of models by itself. Because in again, my past lives, you know, like any other growth marketer, we do a lot of testing, and I've tested freemium versus free trial. At least from my experience, what I've learned is that when we're offering a free trial, the benefits are that you get access, the user gets access to premium level features that's not available in freemium, but you get access to it for a limited time. But that limited time is oftentimes an artificial time frame that someone on the product team or market growth team decides 7 days, 14 days, 30 days, what have you, right? And there's no real reason behind that. And from a user perspective, and this is what I've learned just from talking to other users in the past, sometimes there's some psychological effects where, okay, if I know it's a very short trial, 7-day trial, I'm going to put off signing up until I have time and I'm ready to start to dedicate 7 days to actually hunker down and try out your product, assuming that's a very, you know, intensive type of product. And so like I learned from that experience thinking, okay, if it's a short trial, I might not see as many people, right? Kind of like supporting these data points. And then when they do actually sign up, then it's up to me or the product team to make sure that within that time period that they find use, you know, they're activated, they're on board and activated, they find usage, right? Or get driving towards usage. And that time period, is 7 days enough? Is 30 days enough? That's hard. It's different for every single company. So the downside that I found with free trial is that you're introducing an artificial limitation in terms of a time frame for how much you can use, the time frame you can use the product. That really means you got to get really good with your onboarding, your activation to get to that whole note. So anyway, those were some of the learnings that I had in my past lives. Let's go back to that one question and we'll keep moving under this section. And someone actually did ask in the audience about enterprise. What about proof of concepts, you know, POCs? That's typical of enterprise offerings. How do you think of that as, you know, in light of the PLG conversation? Do you think that's part of an OPLG type of play, completely separate? What are your thoughts, Hila?
Yeah, I think for PLG, actually a lot of time is targeting end user, or if this product is just have a individual use case, right? Or it's relatively simple. So you in order to sell enterprise, you still need like maybe it's a POC combining with this end user. End user can experience the value via using the free product, and they can become the champion. That happens a lot. For example, in my experience with GitLab, they use it for their personal project. They become so convinced, and next time when their company are considering this, they raise this as a possibility. But a lot of times, in order to sell to those enterprise account, you still need to go through that process. POC is to appealing to the buyer, to the decision maker, right? To talk about business use case. So that's how I would think about it. POC alone itself, obviously, it's very different from PLG. But in order to be success in this category or segment, you probably need both.
Yeah, actually, I was gonna, that's my question. As soon as you just answered, can you see a happy existence of POC as well as a freemium or free trial in conjunction for a particular company or, you know, a sales deal? Can you see that happening?
I saw that all the time at GitLab. As I mentioned, when we talk with we did some research among our sales team and our free users, not free user, paid customers. Sometimes they will say, hey, our sales rep will be like, I'm most happy when a deal fell in my lap. What happened is that the company actually, they have some users using GitLab in their previous work or in their personal project. That's the PLG motion, right? They use it for free. They become a kind of a user on their own. They already adopted all the feature. They already know how to use everything. And then when they are ready to make a purchase decision, they are evaluating different tools. They utilize the free version of GitLab or free trial of GitLab to do that POC internally. Like they already did the entire setup, the entire thing, have multiple people try it, use it in that period of time. And then they go to this sales rep basically saying, hey, can I buy this? And I know everything, I just need to negotiate price with you.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Great. Let's keep moving. Okay. The next question under how to set up PLG or setting up PLG is, what are some ways to identify the most optimal user journey?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I love when kind of people think about user journey, because I feel like sometimes it's not thought enough in B2B because it's complicated. I would say there are two parts. The first part is think about the entire user experience from a new user's perspective. I do that a lot. Whenever I work with a advisory client or in my past roles, I pretend I'm a new user. I go through the entire journey from the website to the sign up to use it in a trial or use it as a free user, and then try to pretend I want to buy and try to find the kind of the billing option and understand the pricing, read the tier, try to check out. When I do that, there are usually so many opportunities or frictions that can be removed. So if you go to the next slide, that's something I called PLG new user funnel audit. Like each of the major block, right? Marketing side, sign up, onboarding, self-service, purchase flow. Those are the components of a new user journey. There, you want to make sure this is frictionless, this is compelling, this is easy to understand. So this is one big part. The other big part, I would zoom into that onboarding part. Again, go back to what we said, right? Onboarding and activation usually can be an area people don't pay enough attention to. They just want a lot of sign up, a lot of visitor, a lot of revenue. They ignore, like they need to use it to see the value, to become a revenue, to sign a contract. So again, if you go to the next slide, I recently wrote a blog post about PLG published on Lenny's newsletter. This is a framework I use, and I saw there are actually a couple of questions in the Q&A about how to think about activation, how to think about onboarding. For B2B PLG, I actually think there are 4 aha moments you need to drive. First of all, you need to drive me, like Hila. If I'm trying out, for example, GitLab, you want to convince me, you want to get me to my aha moment to realize, oh, this is so easy to use and I love it. I can use it for my personal website, or I can use it for this app I'm building in my personal time. I really like it. But from there, you also want to get me to maybe be confident and comfortable to invite my coworker, Tony, another developer, say, hey, we may be able to use this in our job as well. It'll make our day so much easier, right? And we may collaborate in certain workflow in there. So that's the team aha moment. And from there, you also want to enable me and Tony, when we are so convinced, to be easily have a conversation with our CTO or our chief financial officer when there's the opportunity to buy a new developer software, like maybe give us some documentation, some tool we can use easily. That's the buyer aha moment. And finally, when my company paid for this piece of software, my company need to be convinced of the ROI as well. So I think about user journey. The first step is like those big blocks. the kind of those, and then the second zoom into onboarding piece to drive usage, to drive adoption.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a fantastic framework. I really like this a lot because having spent time in a lot of enterprise SaaS companies, the notion of the buying committee is a very common concept, meaning when you're trying to sell to like a Fortune 500 company, you're not just going to be interacting with, one person, you're interacting with a lot of people. Yes, it might be a sales-led motion where a sales rep is trying to engage with the buying committee, but this is in a view of a PLG type of scenario, but you still need to satisfy the needs or get to the aha moments of each of these key stakeholders, right? So I think this is fantastic. Kind of a related question. I know we're going off the cuff here and there, but I hope that's okay because this is a conversation, right? And people have a lot of questions. I personally have questions as well. But in terms of things like the buyer aha moment, have you found in your experience that to be experienced by the buyer within the product or usually outside of the product? What are your thoughts on that? Does that make sense?
You mean are those existing at the same time, or?
No, meaning like in, let's say, a more traditional enterprise type of offering or sales motion, the buyer, the person who signs the contract, economic buyer, if we want to use sales terminology, may not always be a person who is in the product using the product,
Yes,
right?
yes,
But to get them to the aha moment is still very important. But do you feel like in a PLG environment, the buyer, that buyer person needs to experience that aha moment within the product, or can that be experienced outside of the product experience?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. That tells me kind of the complexity of this, right?
Yeah.
I think what I've seen successful in some of my clients when we face this problem, basically we saw this account has high usage. There are many very active users, but when we look at the title of the user, this user is a manager, is an analyst, not the decision maker, right? In those cases, there are a couple ways. First of all, you still want to drive, you still want to drive, like you still want to reach out to the buyer. So a lot of times what works is you layer on some sort of outreach, ABM, kind of traditional marketing sales approach to find this buyer quickly. Because the fact that his team are actively using this is a very important thing you can utilize in this case to establish a relationship with this buyer, convince him, right? It's much better than you receive a cold call saying, hey, buy my software, rather than, hey, your team have 10 people actually using my product every month. Are you interested in learning how I can help you set up better compliance or things like that, right? So there's a lot there to be done. Sometimes you can try to encourage the user to invite more people into the product. Maybe the buyer is one of them. That's great. Sometimes the buyer is just too busy. They are their CEO, their CTO, they never are interested in testing out the product as well. So that's okay. So that's why sometimes the aha moment may be outside the product. Maybe you enable the user to prepare some document demo, something so easy, so compelling for them to convince the buyer.
Yeah, that's great. We do have subsequent questions related to that, but I'm going to save that because I know we have questions later on in this deck that's related to that. Let's keep moving. Okay. What are the KPIs? We kind of touched upon this earlier, but what are the KPIs should we be measuring in product-led growth?
Yeah, so if you go to the next slide, if you think about PLG, right? The first, when you don't have anything, right? You don't have this motion set up, I would say your success metric is get to the first self-service conversion or generate first PQL, just get it work. That's the first step. Once you have this established, this is actually a simplified view of the PLG funnel. You basically, you should still measure top of funnel traffic and free sign up, right? Visitors to a website. That's are still important because without that, there's no source of kind of user. But then one very important difference between PLG and sales funnel or marketing funnel is that you really need to measure product usage very closely. By product usage, you can measure things like new user to activation conversion rate. If you define activation by my user need to use my feature ABC in the first 7 days, I want to know that percentage. For example, at GitLab, we measure within the first 14 days, what's the percentage of new team using 2 features and have 2 people. So like we make it very specific. That's we call activation success. We measure that, we improve that every day through our work. And then you want to measure the monetization piece, right? What is the free to paid conversion rate? What is the activation to conversion rate? So that's one. You may also measure the PQL, product qualified leads, you're able to generate from those product usage. So those are the potentially 2 paths, right? Maybe some customer, they convert on their own. Some potential customer, they don't convert, but they use it so much and they are certain size and certain segment. You capture them as a potential leads. Your sales team reach out to them, convert them. And ultimately, what is the revenue coming from basically the PLG funnel?
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Who should own PLG? Oh, okay, this is a big question. And how would you structure a team for PLG?
Yeah, it's a big question. So I think who should own PLG? What I'm saying is that first of all, like if this is a strategic motion, right? You are deciding this growth motion, CEO absolutely should be the sponsor kind of making this type of strategic decision. It's not a decision your head of growth make, because you need to make that decision. You find a head of growth that works in this motion, right? So that's the first thing. But then here I have a relatively typical PLG organization. What I've seen very common is that you need to have a head of growth be in charge of that. That person usually sit in the product organization, but that person also need to have counterparts in marketing team, like head of growth marketing, and in sales team, like head of product-led sales or online sales or SMB sales. And then they are responsible essentially for the different part of the funnel as we just discussed, right? Marketing are responsible for the top of funnel, the signups. Growth product does a lot around activation, conversion, and things like that. And sales team work on the PQL to convert them, to turn them into revenue. And then if you go to the next slide, once the growth product team become a little bit bigger, you can also begin to have those smaller sub teams under it. Like at GitLab, I have a team dedicated to a conversion. I have a team dedicated to activation. And you may have teams working on the foundation, data collection, experimentation, platform, billing, all of that. All of that can be expanded and in the scope of PLG as well.
Got it. Related question to this, head of growth product, is that the same role or same person as a product manager?
That's a great question. Usually, this person is kind of has a PM background, but usually has something called a growth PM background. So product managers begin to develop many specializations. There is the core PM, feature PM. There are the more traditional PM developing features, solving customer pain points. Growth PMs and head of growth product or head of growth, usually they have all those skills, but they focus a lot more on data, experimentation, and their KPIs are not, I ship those features, solving pain points, right? It's how do I improve activation rate? How do I improve conversion rate? So their methodology is similar to PM, core PM, but their KPIs and their specialty is a little bit different.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Okay, next set of questions. We're nearing the home stretch, and then I know we addressed a lot of questions already coming in through the Q&A, but we do want to leave a little bit of time to address any ones that we have not talked about. But this next question, product-led versus sales-led. Can you grow a B2B company utilizing PLG without ever having a need for a sales team?
Yeah, I call this genre of thinking the PLG purist. So, I mean, it's possible, but if you have opportunity to make it even bigger by adding a sales team, why not, right? Like a common example, a very interesting example I've observed over the year is Atlassian. Atlassian started as a very PLG purist kind of team. The founders, they really like, I don't want to have a sales team. I want to build a product so awesome that everyone come use it. I want to make the price low so that there's no hurdle. And that product is my growth flywheel. Like that actually worked, right? That worked well for them. They're able to grow the product. I think even after their IPO or maybe close to their IPO, they don't have a sales team. They're purely online kind of sales, self-service type of business. And they're able to do it to 200 million ARR. I don't remember the exact, but when they become so big, they begin to sell to bigger customers. When they begin to sell bigger customers, the pure PLG purist approach, it doesn't work, right? You need to convince the buyer. You need to address the compliance problem, the security problem. The enterprise buyer require a POC, require a ROI analysis. I don't know, right? So they added sales team, and a very similar story to Canva as well. And they grow so much on this B2C, almost like a concept. But then this year I think many years ago, they hired a sales team, and this year they begin to hire more. So like, I feel like you don't have to be so purist. It's practical selection, right? You want to do this practically. The best companies actually layer on both. And for most companies, you may choose when to start and use that to get to revenue. Like there's nothing wrong of having a sales team. If that works for you, product, get a lot of revenue, you can add a PLG motion a little bit later on. If it's a great fit, maybe start PLG. But yeah, like I don't necessarily think you have to just constrain yourself on one or other.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, because I think this question is also related to one of the earlier questions that we talked about, several questions actually around things like, what markets, what type of companies. You just described, Hila, as an example, right? Like if you're trying to sell an enterprise and you're truly trying to sell an enterprise level offering, let's just say, $1 million contract, you're not going to get that motion of pure product led to signing that contract, because no one's going to put in their company credit card for $1 million. It just doesn't work that way. I mean, just some simple buying behaviors and the ability to purchase certain level types of offerings requires, in this case, like enterprise, the main decision maker or economic buyer to actually sign off. And then you also alluded to all the other parts of the, a human process, which is buying process, security reviews, legal review of documents, and even procurement process. Like that's maybe there are ways to automate some of that in a product-led growth motion, but I think just high level, typically when you're trying to sell enterprise offerings, at some point, if you do decide to move up market more and more, it's going to require humans in the loop, salespeople, relationships, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I think like having both motions at the same time and doing it well and having those work together, which is actually one of the questions I think in the next one related to this one, and also people are asking this, having to product-led growth and sales-led growth work together, assuming that you're targeting a market that facilitates both of these types of motions, I think creates a lot of great synergies, for lack of a better word, in order to help scale your growth. So let's transition to this. I think this is the final prepared question, or the questions we got earlier, and then we'll address some additional questions from the audience. This particular one is, how do you transition from a purely sales-led motion? And again, many of the companies that we're working with here at Mucker are, earlier stage, where it's a lot of it's founder-led. Founder is doing the sales. How do you transition from that kind of scenario at early stage startups to a PLG motion? And related to that, when do you think is a good time to start doing that?
Yeah, I think we talk a little bit about that. I feel like you may not, the transition may not be the right word. It might be how do you layer on, right? The PLG. You don't need to give up
Yeah,
sales motion if it's working.
yeah,
In reality, like a lot of time, what I see is actually many companies, um, they build a foundation in sales first, because if you have you can find some big customers to begin with, why not, right? You can build that revenue foundation, so make that work to a certain extent. You don't want to get started with sales motion, just abandon the next month, right? And transition to PLG, work on it for another month, and go back to sales motion. Like you want to build some foundation there, and then you can add PLG. Like we talk a little bit about, think about how to find an individual use case that is in your target customer, build a free version, build a freemium to allow those free users to use the product. They don't need to get approval from their boss. They don't need to pay anything in their personal credit card. They can already see the value of this product. And then from there, basically, you can begin build the PLG funnel, right? The funnel we talk about. And it takes time to perfect a motion, whether it's sales motion or product led motion. So a lot in reality, what I see sometimes company, they do, they will make PLG sales motion work, and then they build the components of PLG. They optimize it to a certain degree. They may then intensively work on sales a little bit, because they are like, oh, we have some potential big customers, we want to make it work. So like there is even a little bit kind of working on both, but prioritize one at a time a little bit. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. And if I could chime in, and this is also related to one of the questions that came in around, how do you, let's see if I could find it. Someone in the audience had asked, we had invested in PLG early and made it easy to play with and then convert to paying customers. How do we then merge with the sales motion? So very much in line with this type of question, right? Or this question on the screen. Do we provide book demos, navigate customers through onboarding and self-guided onboarding? So if you want to chime in, feel free, Hila. Let me give sort of my experience. So in past companies where we had both motions going at the same time and have done it well, at the very minimum, what made it work well is when the sales team, sales leaders, and again, it could be SDRs or BDRs, depending on how the sales org is structured, and even from marketing, having visibility in product usage and signups and all that stuff in the systems that the go-to-market teams usually work out of, like CRM, like marketing automation, like sales engagement, provides a lot of visibility that they could ideally be trained on how to utilize those data points, right? Like as an example, when again, drawing from my past experience working for companies where we had a free version, and our sales team, we also adopted an account-based marketing strategy, ABM, which is, they're focused on top-tiered accounts worth potentially high ACV values, right? If we were able to provide the sales rep who is working on, let's say, this one particular account, enterprise account, and show that sales rep, hey, did you know that we just got 10 new signups from the users or end users at this particular company within the last 2 weeks? That gives a lot of ammo, for lack of a better word, or insights for the sales rep to go do outbound, whatever you want to call it, outreach, basically reach out to the key decision maker and be able to start a conversation in that way and say, look, hey, we're already seeing some adoption at the user level from your company. There's been 10 users. It looks like you guys are trying to solve for this particular challenge or issue. Let's, what do you think? Do you think it makes sense for us to talk about some sort of, enterprise or at least group-wide type of account, right? Or, some sort of engagement. And at a minimum, like that gives the salespeople visibility, because if sales teams, and I made this mistake myself, sales teams and market teams and the product growth teams are all working in silos, you end up stepping on each other's toes, where sales reps are trying to cold call, and then it turns out that the product-led growth motion, 20 people have already signed up, used product, and maybe self-served them to buy a small group plan without ever having to talk to a person. Well, you just kind of made yourself look like you have no idea what's going on. Right hand's not talking to the left hand. And so you want to avoid these types of situations, right? So at the very minimum, being able to surface product sign up and usage level data into the systems that the go-to-market teams are working on is like, it provides a lot of insights and guidance. Yeah, certainly there's other things that can be involved in having those teams work together. But at a minimum, just being able to have that visibility is very important. Any thoughts you want to add to this, Hila?
Yeah, I think the other thing is you can do something called product-led sales, which is kind of what you described there, right? Utilizing the usage to qualify leads, to filter leads, to generate leads for your sales team. And the other thing I would add is it might be helpful for you to define a threshold of customer size in the very beginning. Like, for example, HubSpot or some other companies, when they begin to do PLG, there is this self-checkout funnel that's working, but the sales team are also involved. It doesn't make sense for sales to talk with every people using your product. So they may make a threshold of, like, if this team is bigger than 10, let's funnel them through the product-led sales funnel. Let's give them more human touch. Sales team is more involved. If they are under 10, sales team leave them alone. Like, they're too small. We should serve them using the product motion or the automated emails and things like that.
Yeah, great. So I know we're at the top of the hour. We've already gone through many of the questions that have been coming in. So let's wrap up the session regarding next steps. So if anybody on this session still has more questions or need help regarding PLG, Hila, we have your email. I hope it's okay that they contact you via email. For Mucker companies, feel free to contact myself, Tony at muckercapital.com, or reach out to your Mucker advisor. As I mentioned earlier, you could certainly reach out and engage with us via our social channels, whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter. And it's, you could find us and do a quick search. Secondly, we do have quite a bit of content, or we'll start putting more content like this and other startup related types of topics on Mucker's blog. So definitely go check out mucker.com/blog, subscribe to it if you also want to be notified for when a recap for this particular session comes out. So definitely go there. If you have any interest in a particular topic, whether it's additional things related to PLG or anything else related to growth, feel free to type it in chat now, or you can email my colleague, Britton at muckercapital.com, and we'll get something lined up. And then lastly, for Mucker, we are an early stage VC. We also operate an accelerator program called Mucker Lab. And if you are an entrepreneur and are looking to get additional help, go to mucker.com and go check out our accelerator program called Mucker Lab, and go apply there, because we're always accepting new applications, entrepreneurs who want to join our program. So that's it. Thank you so much, Hila, for joining me today. This was a great conversation. I learned a lot as well. There's always so many things to learn. And thank you for everyone who stuck with us till the very end. Hope you found a lot of value in this type of session. And if you want to see more or reach out to Hila or myself, just feel free to contact us on the ways that we are showing on the screen right now. So thanks again. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.